Hey everybody, Ricky here from Connerty Meadows Farm, and today in the kitchen we are going to make some lovely goat's milk soap. Now this particular one is oatmeal, milk, and honey soap using our goat's milk and our honey and a whole bunch of other ingredients straight from our farm. It smells amazing. Have a watch. I'll show you step by step how to make your own. Now here on our farm, I do a lot of home rendering of different animal fats. And here I have tallow that is shelf stable in the jar and tallow that I have frozen and put in the freezer. We also have lard, and again, this is rendered down and is shelf stable, and again, it's all from our farm. Now, obviously, I know that the majority of people are not going to have access to home rendered stuff. So you go to the grocery store and you look for this pure lard. And it's made by Tenderflake, and it's a very good one. You can replace that with my home rendered lard and you will get the same results. I have done it to try just to show you. Now I also have chicken fat, and I render this down as well, and this is treated more like a soft oil in the soap. And then the other oils that we are using is olive oil and castor oil. And the castor oil just gives it some bubbles, olive oil rounds it out, and the one oil that I haven't shown because it's in a big 5-gallon pail is coconut oil. So let's get our scale out here, and I love this scale. I used to have another one, but this one I like because it doesn't turn off as quickly when I am weighing items. So the first thing I always do is I have a stainless steel pot. This can't be aluminum, it has to be stainless steel. Soap interacts with aluminum. So I went to the secondhand store and I got this pot, and the first thing we're going to do is measure out my tallow. And again, this tallow was frozen in the freezer. And so I'm just going to throw that into the pot, make sure that I get the right amount. So for this recipe, my tallow and my lard are equal amounts, and then coconut oil is slightly less, and then the chicken fat is slightly less than that, and then the olive oil and the castor oil is at 5%. And as you can see here, I needed to cut a little bit of the tallow to make sure that I got the right amount. And because these were frozen, I had to use a very sharp knife, which could be kind of dangerous. And I don't waste any of the bits. We'll put that away, and I will be able to use it for another soap. This will just go right back down into the freezer. But if I didn't have any of the frozen stuff left, I could use the shelf-stable stuff. This is a jar of chicken fat that has been stored in the fridge, so it is fairly solidified, but it is a very light and soft oil, so you can see it melting in my fingers there. I am going to pop this in the microwave quick, just to make it easier to pour out. This is my lard, and this particular one, again, it's stored in this one actually was stored on the shelf, sorry, not in the fridge. The other one was stored in the fridge. But this one is also very, very hard. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pop this in the microwave as well. You can obviously scoop it up out of the jar, and I have done it, but unfortunately what happens is I also bend spoons, and nobody wants to be bending spoons. So this was the lard that was in the fridge, the partial, and I'm just going to go ahead. I've put that in the microwave. It's warmed up. Now I can pour it into the stainless steel pan. So you can see how much easier it is to scoop out here. It's a much softer, so it makes it a lot easier to get out of the jar. Now, obviously I knew that I needed more than that half jar, so that's why I put the second one in the microwave. Now I'm making sure that I tare my scale between putting the fats in, so that means putting it back down to 0. Now this is another jar of chicken fat because I also knew again that the partial jar of chicken fat was not going to be enough, so I have the second one here, and you can see it is very liquidy coming out. Now we are going to move on to coconut oil, and like I had mentioned, I have a big 5-gallon pail of coconut oil. I was just showing you the small one because you can use store-bought coconut oil, but I have a 5-gallon pail. I am kind of at the end of this big 5-gallon pail, so you get to watch me open the other one, which is brand new and very, very hard. But I just find this much more economical to buy it by the 5-gallon pail from a soap making supply store. And like I said, you can use store-bought. It works fine. Now this is a double burner on our stove, and I am going to put the hard oils on this double burner, on the smaller burner on simmer. So we're just going to heat them up low and slow. And while we are waiting for the hard oils to melt down, we're going to go ahead and we are going to measure out our soft oils. So our olive oil and our castor oil. So normally at this point, I would be adding our beautiful dark maple syrup that we make here on our farm, but because this is an oatmeal milk and honey soap, we are going to be adding our beautiful honey from here on our farm. And if you've never added honey or any other sugar, so maple syrup, honey, sugar to soaps, you're going to add 1 tablespoon per pound of oil, generally speaking. Now I only added 2, even though my total poundage of oils is 5, simply because I don't want to have this volcano on me. So let's pop over and stir up the hard oils. Now you can see that I have left my olive oil, my castor oil, and my honey to the side. I tend to not mix the two because I like to use the soft oils to cool the hard oils down later and somewhere to store my spatula. Okay, so here we are. We've got our milk, and I do some of them into ice cube trays, as I'm showing you here, so that I have smaller amounts. But generally speaking, I will weigh out my milk and I will freeze it in the bags, and I will write down the amount of grams, and then I can go ahead and put them into the pail, and I already know then how much milk is going to be in it in the total overall. Now that said, there's generally some milk that gets left behind in the bag, so I do tend to, just to be on the safe side, reweigh everything. Between these two, I had actually more than I needed, so I just took some out. Now, this is oatmeal milk and honey, so this is whole oats, but we're not putting whole oats in soap. It really doesn't feel well on your skin. So this is ground oats, and all I've done is taken the whole oats and stuck them into a coffee grinder and ground them down very finely. Oh, back to the oils we go. We're just going to give them a stir, and you can see having the soft oils to the side gives you a great place to put your spatula or spoon or whatever, so you're not leaving it on the stove. And the thing that's taking the longest to melt here, the lard is melting down pretty good, but the most bigger pieces that are there are the tallow, because it was frozen, and the coconut oil. All right, so again, you don't want to do more than 1 tablespoon per pound of oil, and I am not going to do that. I find that even though they say that's how much to do, I tend to err on the side of less. I did end up putting 5 in here, and then I didn't videotape it, but I actually ended up taking 2 out, so it was basically 3 tablespoons of the ground up oats. Now, when I'm working on my counter space, because this is my actual kitchen, I always put down newspaper to protect my counters. And this is my soap mold, and we are going to line it with our parchment paper. Now, there's a little trick that I use to line my mold. So I measure from end to end, and then I'm going to cut the parchment paper, and I'm going to show you how I make it so that the parchment paper is all folded up and fits perfectly in the mold. So the first thing I do is I'm marking where that first corner is. fold it over and get that lined up. Then I'm going to put it back on the mold and measure. So from where it's going to sit in the mold, hold it there, and then go to the other side and measure on the inside. And then you can see where the mark is. And then you're going to be able to fold it up. And again, you're folding it to the inside mark, not to the outside mark. Okay, so then that is the width of your inside mold. And then I just fold up the side, and that is going to go into the mold. And then it's very easy to squish it down, and then you kind of crease the other side. You can take it out and do it, but I just find it easy just to crease it in there. Now you're going to cut down the tall edges to the edge of your mold, and you'll see why in a second. I know it looks really weird, but you'll see why here in a second. Then we're going to very carefully lift that middle flap while folding those other ones in. So almost like folding a Christmas present. And again, I'll show you here. So we're going to lift it, and then we're going to pull it up, and we are going to fold it over. And there we go. It perfectly fits into my molds. And then what I do is just make sure the flaps stay down. I just grab an elastic and I stick the elastic around the corners of it, and we are good to go. There, see? Perfectly done. Straighten everything up. Make sure it all looks good, and then move on and do your next one. Let's go back in and check on those oils, and let's see how they are doing. See if we're melted yet. Now they are completely melted. Oh, tiny little bit left. So at this point, when I only have a few little floating bits left, I turn the heat off because I don't want this to stay getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. You can see here I have a clump of honey still in with the olive oil and the castor oil, but don't worry, when we add these other oils and the honey into the hot oils, it will, one, cool the oils down, but it also melt the honey down. Now that our oils are all melted down, we are ready to move on to measuring our lye. At this point, you can see I have put gloves on. Now, I like to use these kitchen gloves. They are reusable, and that's what I really, really like about them. It's just a safety thing, and I'm not constantly getting rid of cheap other gloves. The other thing I like about them is they pull up all the way to my elbows, so a lot of extra protection. So this is my lye, and I tend to either buy from the soap supply store that I get my coconut oil from, but when they don't have it in stock, which they haven't had a lot lately, I use lye from our local hardware store, Home Hardware here in Canada. It has some of the best lye. I've had great success with it for probably about 10 years now. All right, so these oils have cooled down quite a bit now, and so I'm going to add my other oils and the honey, and we are going to mix them all together. Now, you can use a thermometer and make sure that your oils are within 10 degrees of your milk and lye mixture. I haven't done that in a long, long time. I generally just eyeball it. I've kind of got it down. But generally speaking, for milk soaps, you want to soap under 90. Generally, I used to soap between 80 and 90, but now I just kind of eyeball it, and I've gotten pretty good at knowing where my temperature's at. So I'm just stirring in the soft oils now and the honey, and you can see that it's all just mixing together. And this also helps bring the temperature of these oils down if it was too high, but it wasn't. I can just tell because sometimes it starts to re-solidify. Now we are going to add lye to our frozen goat's milk. This takes quite a bit of time. This is not something you can rush. So I just put a little bit of lye on, and then I start squishing the frozen milk around. and just a little bit of lye and squish, a little bit of lye and squish, and you'll see it will slowly start to melt. So there's a little bit of like melted milk down there, but it takes quite a while. You can't just take the entire thing of lye and dump it on the frozen milk. It will not melt it properly, and it will not mix properly. You will have pockets in there of frozen milk still. So the best thing to do is just a little bit stir, a little bit stir, and you can see I just put this on fast forward because nobody needs to sit and watch this in real time. And just a little bit and stirring, and you can see it slowly starts to melt down. And that's the biggest thing. You just want to slowly melt it down. Now, I do find oftentimes, because I'm doing this in a big clump, that it won't be completely melted. So I very, very, very carefully take my immersion blender and blend it down. All right, let's mix it all together. I've moved my oils into this nice big pail, and now we are very carefully going to pour our lye milk mixture in. And we have to be very careful. We don't want to splash, and we don't want any injuries here. Now you can see these gloves, they've slipped down a bit, but they do go all the way to my elbows. And I have long sleeves on, and I also have a face shield on. I used to wear goggles, but I just find that the face shield adds a little extra layer of protection, especially when you are using the stick blender as I am here. And sometimes soap splashes, it's just inevitable, it happens. So I like to play it a little bit safer. And doing that, I put the face shield on since they're readily available these days. Now you can see the milk is definitely reacting with the lye, and that is why it is bright orange, almost as orange as my gloves, and that's okay. Milk does that. Milk also has a very funky smell when you mix it with the lye, so don't be surprised if that happens. Now the honey is also reacting in here, so all those sugars are reacting and causing this bright orange. Now I've been slowly checking this whole time to make sure that I have a light trace. Once I've reached light trace, then I am adding in my ground oats, which you just saw me do, and then we are going to go ahead and stick blend that. Now we are going to stick blend this to not a thick trace, but a little bit more than a light trace, so partway in between. And the reason why I like it at that point is because I do a lot of scooping into my sample size containers, and I do want it to still move a bit, but I don't want it like super thick because I just want to have time to work with it. So I'm really keeping a close eye on it. You can see here my lovely little samples, and you can see it's pretty runny because I want to be able to pour it nicely into these sample size containers. And if I had gotten it to thick trace, then I wouldn't have time to get it into all the sample sizes and into the regular molds without it chunking up pretty good. So that's why I go ahead and bring it to just slightly more than a light trace. All right, moving on, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put them into my molds. And it's just to basically pour it in, scrape it out, and tap down any air bubbles that may have been added. I like to scrape every last bit of soap out that I can. Not to mention, I don't want to have any soap left lying around in containers because I am on a well. So because I'm on a well, my cleanup might look different than what yours does. I use my towels that I would use for drying dishes, and I wipe everything down. And that way I don't worry about my pipes getting clogged up at all or any of this going down into my septic system. So everything gets wiped down with the towels. And then once everything is wiped down with the towels, I go ahead and I wrap another towel around the main towel that I use to wipe stuff down, and then I just set that aside in my laundry room for 2 or 3 days. And by the end of that 2 or 3 days, these it's saponified and it's become soap, at which point then I'm able to just throw it in my regular wash. Now the water that comes out of my tap is extremely hot. We've actually like gone down to our hot water tank and we have turned the hot up. And the reason for that is we have a cow and we milk her, and we are constantly washing her milking machine and all of our cheese making supplies. So the next step for me in cleaning everything up is very, very, very hot, hot, hot water. You can see the steam coming up. In fact, it's so hot that it burns me through these gloves. But that is the next step. So everything has been wiped down, and now I just use a lot of regular soap. Dawn is what we generally use, and again, it's the same soap and the same heat that I am using to disinfect my milking machine and all of my cheese making supplies. So it's pretty hot, but it also breaks down any of the fats and anything that may be left on any of the utensils that I've used. So usually when I'm washing, I start with the stuff that had lye, and then I move on to like the regular pots and stuff that just had the oils. And I don't know why I do it that way. That's just the way I do it. All right, so our soap has now sat undisturbed for a little while, and so it has thickened up a bit at this point, and it just saves me a lot of time stick blending to get it thick. So here we are. Now I'm able to put my design on the top of it, and as you saw, they had a lid on it to help force gel it a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and I'll put the lid back with the samples that are just kind of balanced on the top. And I can do the other one now. See how nice and smooth it is. And all I'm using is the back of a spoon, and I'm just giving it a little swish up on both sides and underneath the elastic, and another swish on the other side. And then we have a very nice, cute design. And then I do need to find my towel again and wipe this spoon down. And then I can go ahead and wash it like I did with all the rest of the utensils. Now this was the towel wrapped in the towel. So the outside towel doesn't have soap on it. The inside towel does. And I just do that so that no one accidentally gets any soap on them. It's just more of a safety thing. Wrap it back up, and then I can take that to the laundry room and set it aside for a few days. I'm going to put some newspaper down here in case there's any soap on the outside of my molds, and that way nothing will get wrecked. Normally, for my goat's milk soaps, I will put them in the fridge. But because this is oatmeal milk and honey, and I don't mind the tan discoloration because of the honey and because of the oatmeal, I'm actually just having it in my garage. Now, I'm in Canada and it's April, so it's still relatively cool. It's not room temperature, it's just slightly below, probably anywhere between 10 and 12 degrees Celsius out here. So it's not super cold, it's not room temperature. It's still gonna go tan. I mean, as you saw in the video, it did go orange, almost as orange as my gloves, and that is because of the honey in it, but that's okay. Again, like I said, I don't mind that. So we're just gonna let it sit out here in the garage covered, and then it'll be ready to cut tomorrow. Now, if you watch my other goat's milk soap video, and I can link it up here, it's like a beginner goat's milk soap tutorial video, you'll see me put them in the fridge. And normally with my soaps, that's what I do, is I put them in the fridge because I don't want them going tan and I don't want them overheating. In this case, I'm trying to force a little bit of a gel and I'm trying to get a little bit of that tan color. So that's the only reason why they're out here in the garage and not going into a fridge. So the last little bit of cleanup in the kitchen is just getting rid of all of the newspaper. And this is what I really love about doing this on the counter, is I don't have to worry about any lye soap getting on my counters. I just fold up the newspaper and my kitchen is pretty much cleaned. Our oatmeal milk and honey soap has now sat for 24 hours. We're gonna go ahead, we're gonna clean up the little samples, and we're gonna cut the soap. So you can see the little samples there, and I'll walk you through all of that. So you can see that the samples are pretty messy on the top, not clean across. So I have this little scrap dish that I use for scrap bits of soap. And the end of this knife is pretty flat. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to scrape off all of the extra bits of soap. And I'm going to save them all. We don't get rid of them because we can use this later. Clean these all up and get them all ready to pop out. Now these were still pretty soft, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna stick them in the freezer, and then in a little bit, the next day, I will be able to take them out. So 12 to 24 hours or so in the freezer, just because if I tried to pop them out now, they would not hold their shape. They would be basically mush. So just popping them in the freezer makes it so that they come straight out. Now we can move on to doing our loaf molds. Take the elastics off, open up the sides, and we pop the soap right out. And the freezer paper makes it easy to do that. Now we're going to open this up, and again, I am not going to waste any of the little soap scraps because I have a use for them. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to scrape all the soap scraps off, and we're going to clean up the edges of the soap here, and all of those will go into the scrap bin. Clean everything up side to side and the edges, and then we can go ahead and get ready to cut this on our soap cutter. Now I'm going to tighten it up, and this is a Buds soap cutter. And I cut mine to slightly larger than 1 inch, and that gives them some shrink room. And then usually they end up at about 4 ounces per bar. It's a nice size bar and it fits really nicely in your hand. Let's move on to the next one, cleaning up the edges, scraping it down, and cutting it all up. As you can see, it does have a really nice tan, like warm color. One thing we're going to talk about is how I store my soap. I live on a farm in the country. We have mice. In case you didn't know, mice love soap. That whole put soap out, mice will go away, not true. In fact, oatmeal milk and honey is one of their absolute favorite soaps. Don't ask me how I found that out. It's terrible. Anyway, so how do I store my soap? If you can guarantee a mice-free place, cardboard shoebox from the store, doesn't cost you anything, poke a couple holes in it, put them in there, put them in a closet, and you can ignore them for a while. Now what I do is I have some plastic containers and I put holes all along them. And put holes in the lid. Not so big a mouse can get through, but big enough that they can still breathe, because they still need to air. Now, this particular recipe, I find, while you can use it at 6 to 8 weeks, which is your normal cure time, this particular recipe I find works the best after 3 months. Like, you get the nicest lather, they last a really long time. It's a really great soap after that 3-month period. So the other thing that I do is in about a month, because they're still pretty soft, I will put the date that I made them on the side, and I will stamp my logo on the front of the soap. And the reason why I wait a month is right now they're really, really soft. While I could stamp them now, it's not going to be a very nice defined stamp, and I don't like the squishy wishy. It just doesn't, it's not a clean stamp. So I wait the month, and then I will put shrink wrap down and then the stamp on top. But there we go. That is our beautiful soap. Now the other question I'm going to address is this. This is my little container that you saw me putting all the little soap scraps and bits in. Now I have a number of these downstairs. This is all the little bits and bobs of many different kinds of soaps. And then what I do at around Christmas time is I will melt these all down, and I'll make either confetti soap, but my favorite one to make is I melt all of the different colors down. I add charcoal to it like that, and then I make naughty coal. So you can give a little Christmas present that's naughty coal that's still 100% usable from all the melted down soap. It's a great way to use them up. I also sometimes make a soap that I'll call the kitchen sink, where I just like melt a whole bunch of different ones down. I'll make a new batch, add the scraps to the new batch, and basically you've got all different kinds of soap, so everything but the kitchen sink. Just a couple things you can do to use up your scrap bits so that they don't go to waste. I will admit at this point it has been more than a day since I put these in the freezer. So what I'm doing is actually I'm just pulling the edges apart to give some air in there, and it makes it easier to pop them out. And you can see they just kind of pop right out. Some of them are stuck a little bit more, but they at least keep their defining edges. And again, I stretch them all out to put some air in between the edges, and then I can just pop them right down and in. And you can see the big difference between the ones that went in the fridge and the ones that didn't. Thanks for hanging out with us on the farm today as we made some soap. Can't wait to see what you make. We'll see you next time.